Hello guys, and welcome back to my channel. In this video I'm going to show you guys how to sew an inbuilt corset with a Queen Anne neckline for a big bust. So in this video you are going to learn how to sew an invisible corset. I'm going to teach you guys the double boning technique, corset cup caging, how to fix a modesty panel and create eyelet space, how to fix an eyelet, how to drape lace on a corset cup, how to cut and sew a straight skirt, and properly fix a zip and take in the darts when you're working with a lace fabric. And then I'm also going to show you guys how to join an inbuilt corset to a skirt to form a gown. So if that is what you're interested in, keep on watching. I already made two separate videos apart from this one, so this is the last part of the video. The first video I uploaded was on how to do the bust caging. The second video was on how to draft the pattern, and this video is going to be all about the sewing technique. So I suggest you go ahead and watch the first video on how to draft the pattern before watching this one, because it's going to help a lot and also help with your understanding. The first thing I'm going to work on is the corset. So I already have all of the pieces already. I've gone ahead to cut the piece on the fabric, and what I'm going to do now is explain all of the pieces that I have here with me. So the material I'm using for this is cloth stay, shining face, and the lace fabric. Okay, so I've gone ahead to cut everything out, and I just want to explain everything for you guys. If I had added the cutting process, this video would have been very long, so please pay attention to everything that I'm going to explain. Right here I'm explaining the front pattern. I'm going to explain the front pattern first before I move on to the back pattern. So I added half of an inch sewing allowance to the cup area, but for this side I'm using 0.75 inch seam allowance for this side, and the reason why I'm doing that is because I want to do the double boning technique for the corset. So I'm using 0.75 inch as the joining allowance for all of this side, and then I'm using 1.5 inch seam allowance. This is the side front, so it's 1.5 inch seam allowance that is here. But for the upper part I'm using just half of an inch seam allowance, and for this cup area I'm using half of an inch seam allowance as well. The reason why this side is 0.75 inch is because it's 0.75 inch that I took from here. So what I'm going to do is, after joining, I'm going to trim up the excess of 0.25 inch that might be around. Okay, so this is it for the front, and I've already gone ahead to also cut the lace. I cut this front in two places, and I didn't cut it on fold because I'm also going to be doing the double boning technique at the center front. That is why I cut it individually, and I added 0.75 inch to the side. For the hem of the corset I also added 0.75 inch seam allowance. Okay, so this is it. And then for the cup I added half of an inch seam allowance all round, and made sure that I notched the bust point area so that I won't mix it up when I'm joining. Then for the yoke, this front yoke I also added half of an inch seam allowance all around. I did not cut lace for the front yoke because there's already an overlapping yoke that I'm going to be attaching to the corset, and that is going to be with the lace fabric. So the lace fabric will end up covering up this yoke. So I'm going to show you guys that part later. That is everything for the front. Let's move on to the back. That is everything for the front pattern. Let's move on to the back pattern. For the back yoke, I cut out the lace because the overlapping yoke for the front does not extend to the back. So this is the back yoke here. I cut this in two places, one for the right, one for the left. Okay, and then this is the corset back. I also added 0.75 inch as the joining allowance, and for this upper part here it is also half of an inch I added also to the armhole area, just like I did for the front pattern. And then the hem is 0.75 inch as well. For this center back is half of an inch seam allowance. This is where the eyelets will be, so it's just half of an inch seam allowance that I added. And just like I did for the front pattern, I added 1.5 inch seam allowance to the side back, so that the seam allowance for the side front and the side back will match. So that is everything. Let me show you guys the lining piece. So this is the lining piece that has been cut out, and I've also ironed estate to it. I've only explained the allowance I added to everything, but I've not explained how I actually cut this fabric. So I cut this in 3 places. I first of all cut this on the fashion fabric, that is the lace itself. Then I cut shining face in 2 places. It's in 2 places because one will be the lining and the other one will be underneath the lace as interfacing for the lace. That is because the lace is transparent. If I wasn't working with a transparent fabric, I'll be cutting just the fashion fabric and the lining piece, but in this case I'm cutting the lining piece in 2 places, one as the main lining and one as interfacing for the lace. So I will be ironing estate, not just the lining piece. I will also iron it to the one that will be as interfacing for the lace. I just didn't iron it here at first, but I eventually went on to iron estate to all of the pieces. So don't let that confuse you, okay? So here I'm working on the front yoke. I'm going to turn the front yoke and the back yoke before joining it to the corset, but I just want to show you guys where I will be sewing down. So I'm turning the interfacing for the lace and the lining together. Remember that for the front it is the overlapping yoke that will be the lace fabric. So all of this part is not the whole of this part I'm going to stitch on. It's only this side that is going towards the neckline that I'll be running a stitch at when I want to join it together. The shoulder area, the armhole area, and the parts that will be attached to the corset cup will not be joined, okay? So I'm just pinning the other one and I'm going to keep this aside. So for the cup, remember that I did not cut lace for the cup because I'll be draping the lace on the corset cup later, okay? So I'm just going to open up everything. Please don't get confused because one part of the lining doesn't have interfacing. I eventually ironed interfacing to all of the pieces because I realized that will give a better fit. So here I'm just going to join everything together using the half of an inch seam allowance. So I'm just placing it this way and then I'll go ahead and pin it down and just show you guys the direction in which it's going to go, which is like this. And then I'll join the pieces together using half of an inch seam allowance. I'll use the parts of the bust points I notched as a guide to make sure that all of the points are being joined equally. So I'm going to do the same thing for both the interfacing for the lace and the lining piece. As you guys can see, I'm making sure that the bust points match and I'm pinning that down. So I'll go ahead and stitch this down with half of an inch and I'm just unraveling the other piece. One will be used as interfacing for the lace, the other will be used as the lining, okay? They are identical. So I'm still going to iron estate to this one, so please don't let it confuse you. So after pinning the cups together, I'll set it aside and then start arranging the pieces together according to how I'm going to sew it, starting with the front. So as you can see, I have the estate already ironed interfacing for the lace, and I'm just placing the lace on top of the shining face. So you can see that this has made the lace to not be transparent. and I'm just arranging it according to how I am going to sew it down so that it doesn't mix up. When you're sewing a corset, it's very important to arrange all of the pieces and sew it immediately. If you don't sew the corset immediately, you can end up mixing up the pieces, which will give you a lot of issues later, especially if it is cut into smaller pieces. So I'm going to go ahead and use a pin to secure the lace to the shining face. Some people usually top stitch this all round, but I feel like that is kind of unnecessary, but you can do that if you want. For me, I'm going to just use a pin to pin the lace to the shining face. So after arranging the pieces together and pinning the lace to the shining face, I'll go ahead and set it aside. You guys can't see what I'm doing, but I basically rearranged everything on the floor. That is why I'm taking it accordingly. And then I also went ahead to arrange the lining piece. This is the lining piece here, and what you guys are seeing in this video now is the lining piece without interfacing ironed to it. That is something that I corrected later. I just want to keep emphasizing on that so you guys don't get confused. So I'm going to go ahead and also join this part with 0.75 inch seam allowance. So I'm just pinning it according to how I'm going to join it. This part is not really complicated because it's just one piece I'm working with. So guys, after doing the lining, I'll go ahead and also keep this aside, and next thing I want to arrange is the back pattern. The first part of the back pattern that I will be arranging is the back yoke. So I have the back yoke here, the lace is there, the interfacing for the lace and the actual lining. Remember, I explained that when attaching the yoke to the corset, you would have turned the yoke with the lining before joining it, right? So this is the yoke here. I'm placing the lace first on the interfacing for the lace. Make sure that you do not mix this up. Then I will grab the lining piece. Over here, I'm just using the pins to secure the lace to the interfacing for it, and then I'm placing the lining on top. Remember, I said I later ironed stay to it. So I'm going to stitch only this part that is towards the neckline. All these other parts I'm using my hand to demonstrate will not be sewn. Just the part that is going to be towards the neckline, the armhole, the shoulder area, and the part that is attached to the chest line will not be stitched down. The same thing for the front, okay, which is what I tried to explain. So I'm just going to pin this together and keep it aside so that I can arrange the main back piece. So just like I did for the front, I'll place the lace on the interfacing for the lace and just pin it down all round so that the lace will be secured to the shining face. So this back pattern is not very difficult to mix up, but the center back can be mixed up easily. You can mistakenly turn it upside down or switch it the wrong way. So it's important that you arrange this according to how you want to sew it. So I've also gone ahead to arrange the back pattern on the floor somewhere, and then I'm also doing the same thing for the lining. I just pinned this according to how I want to sew it. So guys, this is everything here. The interfacing for the lace. So this is basically the front, which I'm going to join together. Then I have the lining for it over here. The cup, for the cup, remember that the lace is going to be draped on top. And for the yoke, you're turning the lining with the lace before attaching it to the corset. So when you want to join the front of the corset, that's the outer part of the corset, and the lining together, then you insert the yoke in between. So I'm going to go ahead and first of all join the front, then go ahead and join the lining before joining the cup. After joining the cup, I'm going to drape the lace on top. After draping the lace, I will attach the cup to the corset. Then I'll join the lining and the main fabric together while inserting the yoke in between. I'm still going to show the process of everything, but I just want to give you guys a recap of everything that I'm going to do. So I'm going to go ahead and join everything off camera. I'm going to join the front, join the back, and then I'll take you guys along from there. So guys, one thing that you probably have not observed is that I'm working with a beaded fabric. The beads are not just very visible on camera, so it's very important to get rid of the beads along the sides that you want to sew, so that you don't break your machine needle and give yourself unnecessary stress. So this is what I am using to remove beads from lace. This came with my sewing machine, this mini scissors thing. I don't really know what to call it. It came with my sewing machine, but you can probably get this at any tailoring store. You just use this to cut the beads off. It's better than using hammer, which can damage the fabric. It's more stressful and causes too much mess. And you can see that I'm doing this on a white tray. After removing all of the beads, I had a whole lot of beads that I had to put in a container. So it's best to do this on like a tray, so that all the beads you are removing, you can get them and store rather than leaving them on the floor. I'm gone ahead to join the back piece together. So I'm going to go ahead and join the front piece. So guys, I've gone ahead to join the front. I've joined everything, but I've not joined the sides yet. So what I'm going to do now is iron stay to the lining. I'm ironing stay to the lining because I wanted to do the double boning technique and post gauging on the main lace, on the main fabric, but I decided to do it on the lining so that it will look like an inner wear. So I'm going to go ahead and iron the lining, because you cannot do something like that without ironing stay. So guys, this is the front piece. This is the main fashion fabric. I've gone ahead to join the front. This is the front piece. This is the back piece. As for this cup, I'm still going to drape the lace on top. And then this is the yoke for the back, the main fabric, and the yoke for the front. Okay, I have not yet added the overlapping lace to it yet. Also note that I've not ironed any of these pieces, that's why they're looking like this. I just want to show you guys. We're still going to get to that. And then this is the lining piece. This is the lining for the front, this is the lining for the back. I've gone ahead to join everything together. So before I continue, I want to take you guys through how I'm going to do the caging for the corset cup. So that's what we're going to get into now. After doing the caging, then we go ahead and iron everything, create the boning channel, and then join all of the pieces together. Okay guys, so remember in this video I said I've already done a separate video on how to go about corset cup caging. So please go and watch that one before you continue with this. I just had to find a way to break this video down so that it is not too long. So after the bust caging have been done, what I want to do is drape the lace on the cup. So the corset cup caging was done on the lining piece, not on the interfacing for the lace, but it is on the interfacing for the lace that I want to place the lace on. But you know that it does not have structure, so I can't just place the lace on it without giving it structure. What I did was that I placed this interfacing for the lace, I placed it on top of the corset cup caging, which I have already done, so that it can be firm. If you have not done that, you can just use a breast ball, a tailor's ham, or just stuff the cup, but I highly recommend doing it like this so that it is accurate. Okay, so this is the draping part now. What I'm doing is that I'm placing the lace on the cup. As you can see, I have a bit of space all round, so this is a good way to drape without having much issues getting everything to fit. So you will notice that the upper part and the sides will fit well because of the way I placed the lace on the cup. So what I'm doing now is that I'm pinning this down. I'm pushing this pin through the lace, the interfacing for the lace and the lining, which I've already done the corset cup caging on. This is to just hold everything in place before I actually arrange the lace properly on the one that will be the interfacing for the lace. Okay, so I'm just using a pin to hold it down, and after that what I'm going to do next is to start using a pin to hold down the lace to the interfacing for the lace only, not including the lining, which I've already done cup caging on. That's exactly what I'm doing now. You can see that I'm trying to bend the pin some kind of way to make it pass through without passing through the caging. So when you're draping a lace on a corset cup, the upper part, it has to be flat. Okay, so that's what I'm doing. I'm just spreading it through, making sure that the upper part is flat, and after I've done that, I'll move on to the side. If you watch closely, you'll see that I'm spreading this lace from the top to the sides this way. So the upper part is going to be flat, the lace is going to be flat on it, there will be no bulging, and the sides will be like that as well. So the parts that there's going to be a bit of adjustment will now be at this center line here. Can you guys see what I'm trying to explain? The side is relaxed, the upper part is relaxed, but you see this place here, that is where I'm going to do a bit of adjustment. So before I do that, I'm just going to go ahead and trim the lace all around. Okay, making sure I give a little bit of space around that area so the lace doesn't become shorter than the cup. Alright guys, I've gone ahead to cut out the lace. What I want to do now is the adjustment for this center part. If you are working with a fabric without any design or pattern, you can go ahead and just cut this straight down the middle and then place one under the other. But in my case, this lace have a flower design right here, so I cannot just cut it straight, because if I do that, I will cut through the flower and then it will be obvious that there is a kind of joining there. So what I'm going to do is that while I'm cutting, I will trace out the flower, and then I'll place the flower over it like this and use a pin to hold it down. So what I'm going to do is that I'll use needle and thread to tack it. I know you're probably wondering how this is going to look like, but I'm telling you guys that once you tack this thing down, it's not going to be obvious that there's a cut out there. That is if you tack it properly. And also note that you cannot do this for all fabrics. It's because this is a lace fabric, that is why I can do this. If it is Ankara or crepe, obviously you can't do it like this, you have to cut it out. So now that I've pinned that part down, I'm going to go ahead and trim off the excess, and then I'll remove the pins holding the lace part to the lining part. That is where the cup caging is. Okay, and then after I've removed the pins, you'll see that everything is staying perfectly in place. I'm going to go ahead and repeat this process for the other cup as well. So guys, this is everything for the cup caging. You can go ahead and top stitch all round, but I will not be top stitching all round. I'm just going to use a pin to hold it together and join to the corset. Okay, so let's move on to the next step. Remember that overlapping piece I was talking about? So this is it right here. I've not yet cut it out on the fabric, so this is the pattern here. I've gone ahead to add 0.5 inch seam allowance to it all round, and 1.5 inch seam allowance here because it's going to be added to the side of the corset. So if you watch the pattern drafting tutorial, you will understand this better. So I really suggest you watch that video first, because that is what explains how to draft the pattern and everything this is just a sewing tutorial, so watching the pattern tutorial is also very helpful. So I'm just cutting this out after adding the seam allowance all around and then cutting it on my lace fabric. So I'm going to cut this in 2 places, one for each of the arm, and make sure that you don't end up cutting 2 of the same side. So I suggest that you cut this on fold. So guys, this is the 2-piece right here. I'm gonna head to cut it out. I just want to give you guys an overview of everything I'm going to be doing next. So this is the corset here. I'm gonna head to join it and iron the seam allowance open, as you can see, but I've not joined the sides yet. So this is how it's going to be. I'm going to attach the cup this way, and then I will place the yoke, the front yoke. So this overlapping piece is going to come from the side and extend all the way to the shoulder points, just like that. So that is how the overlapping piece works. So I'm just going to keep that aside first. I hope that aided your understanding, and move on to the next step. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold this side in, the side that is going towards the neckline. I will fold it in by 1/2 inch and pin it down. This is going to be hand tacked later. So for now, I'm just going to use a pin to hold it in place before joining it to the corset. After doing that, the next thing to do is to attach the cup to the corset. But before attaching that, there's a little adjustment I'll have to do around the cup area. So remember, I explained that at this side it was 0.75 inch seam allowance that I put from top to bottom. So I'll have to notch this particular point so that it can relax towards the other side, that's the opposite direction, and serve as the seam allowance for the cup. So this is what I mean. Okay, I'm just notching the other side as well, and after notching it, I'll be able to adjust the seam allowance here. If it is excess of 0.5 inch, which is the actual cup allowance, then I'll make adjustments for it. So now that I've notched that part, I'm able to open up the side flat without it affecting the rest of the seam allowance. And now I'm just cutting off the excess of 0.25 inch seam allowance here, so that the seam allowance for the cup will rhyme. For this other side, I didn't really need to cut much. So after doing that, I'm going to be able to attach the cup, and I'm just doing the same thing for the lining piece as well. So after I'm done with the adjustments, the next thing to do is to attach the cup. So you have to make sure that this joining parts aligns, the cup part and the main corset. You have to make sure that they both align, and then you go ahead and join it using the 1/2 inch seam allowance. Note that the parts of this lace that I pinned down, that's the part that was draped, I'm going to be using needle and thread to tack it down later. After tacking it down, it's going to come out looking very seamless, and it won't be obvious that there was a slash in the center of the corset cup, so you don't have to worry about that. So guys, one thing I should have done for this lining piece is to stitch down the boning channel first before attaching the cup. So I ended up doing that in between attaching the cup, because you know, this cup is already very firm because it has been caged, so it's pushing into the center of the cup. So I would advise stitching down the boning channel before adding the corset cup. So this is it here. I'm going to go ahead and stitch that down. So this is actually what I'm talking about here. I noticed that when attaching the cup was pushing into the center front, so I had to quickly stitch down the boning channel. I'm doing the double boning technique, which means that there will be 2 bonings side by side. So I just quickly stitched down the one for the center front so that I can fully attach the cup. And then after I attached the cup, I went ahead to stitch down the rest of the boning channel. I don't know if you guys can tell, but fixing the cup was a bit difficult because the cup is already stretched out due to the boning that was added to it. So when you're doing this, you just take your time with it, don't rush, and you eventually fix the cup. So this is what it looks like. You can see that the cup is pushing into the center, which is why I went ahead to quickly stitch down the one for the center first. So like I said, I just stitched down the cup area. So I'm just going ahead to complete the boning channel for the center front, and also sewing down the boning channel for the rest of the corset. So because I'm doing the double boning technique, is the seam allowance that will be used to create the boning channel. So I'm just going to go ahead and stitch down about half of an inch on both sides, making sure that the boning can pass through. So you can see I was checking if it can pass through, and it was able to. So I'm just going to go ahead and create the boning channel for the entire front part, and I'm doing this on the lining. So what an invisible corset is all about is that whatever you're doing, the boning, the cup, everything will be on the lining, and then the fabric will just be placed over it. So I'm gonna have to create a boning channel for both the front and the back of the corset lining. So what I want to do now is join everything together. Remember that the seam allowance at the side is 1.5 inch. So I'm just using my tape rule to mark that out, and then I'll go ahead and join this together. After that, I will also create a boning channel on this side part. This is going to help to really cinch in the waist and give the corset more structure. So it's advisable that you don't skip this part. I'll do the same thing for the other side, and then also join the main fabric together. One thing I'm going to do when joining the main fabric together is to insert the overlapping yoke for the front in between. Okay, so this is the main fabric here. As you can see, I've joined everything together, and this is the overlapping yoke. So this overlapping yoke, it has to be in between the front and the back piece, which should be at the side. So I'll just place it here, making sure that the armhole matches together. If you watch the drafting tutorial, you understand this better. So you can see that I just placed it this way and pinned it down. So it's the same 1.5 inch seam allowance that I added to the yoke. So joining it won't be a problem. And I just went ahead to add the back piece and pin it down. I'll go ahead and repeat the same process for the other side. Pin the overlapping yoke down to the front piece first, then pin the back piece to it, and then after doing that, I'll go ahead and stitch down the sides using the 1.5 inch seam allowance. After joining the sides together and I insert the other yoke piece, this is what it's going to look like. So the overlapping yoke won't be looking transparent after joining all of the pieces together. So I'm just going to go ahead and stitch this down and show you guys what to do next. So guys, as you can see, I've gone ahead to stitch everything down. This is the lining piece and this is the main fabric. I've joined everything together. The next thing to do is to turn the lining and the main fabric together while inserting the yoke in between. So this entire process is basically showing you guys how to do an inseam finishing. Okay, when I've joined all of the pieces together, all of the rough edges will be hidden inside. So this is basically how it is going to look like after I was just showing it to you guys so that you can see. But before I turn the lining with the main fabric, I decided to insert the boning for the center front first because I noticed that it might be a bit difficult to reach this cup area when inserting the boning. So make sure that when you cut the boning, it is 1 inch shorter than the actual length, and then you go ahead and use fire to melt both edges so that they are not sharp and it won't be able to tear the fabric. So the boning is going to be shorter so that it will not get into the seam allowance and make it difficult for you to stitch it. So I went ahead to just insert the boning for the center front first before turning the lining with the main fabric. Then I'll also go ahead and notch around the cup so that it can relax properly. One thing you need to notice that the scissors has to be facing sideways so that the notches will be slant and not straight directly into the stitch so that you don't weaken the stitch. So to turn the lining with the fabric, you face right sides together. Then you insert the yoke in between the lining and the fabric, making sure that you pin the yoke to exactly where it is meant to be. So as you can see, I already pinned the yoke first of all to the front piece, and then I pinned everything to the lining. You have to make sure that all of the points for the main fabric and the lining is matching properly. Okay, you can see that I'm taking my time to arrange all of this before pinning. So this is exactly what you want to do. So I'm going to just insert the yoke for the other side, making sure that the overlapping yoke is not getting in the way. So I'm just going to push that one aside so that it doesn't interfere with the stitch line. So guys, for the back piece, we are going to also insert the yoke in between the lining and the fabric, basically the exact same thing. So you have to make sure that you're leaving a space of 1/2 inch at the center back here, which is going to be for turning the center back line later. Remember that there's 1/2 inch seam allowance there, so you're going to leave out the seam allowance and then pin the yoke to the fabric as well. So just make sure that the armhole is matching and you don't mix this up, because it's easy to mix up if you don't pay close attention. And remember also that we are going to be inserting the sleeve, so you're not going to stitch this armhole line, just the upper part, the neckline. You also skip the armhole here and then stitch this upper part. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and stitch all of this down off camera and then show you guys the results. So this is it right here. I've stitched it down already, and I'm just making notches around the neckline so that it can relax properly. Okay, so you have to make sure that you notch around the neckline, although it won't be difficult to make the neckline relax because the bust caging did not interfere with the seam allowance. So what I'm going to do next is to stitch down the center back line. Remember that we left 1/2 inch seam allowance, so you go ahead and stitch it down. After stitching it down, this is what it is looking like. As you guys can see, I have not ironed it yet. One thing that you're going to need to do to this cup area is to drag the main fabric to make sure that it fits into the lining cup. Remember that bust caging was done on the corset cup, so the corset cup is already stretched out, but the actual fashion fabric, that is the main lace, is not yet stretched out. So you have to stretch it out on the cup and pin it. So now what I'm doing here, I'm stretching it out, making sure that all of the points match, and I'm pinning it down. So I'm going to use needle and thread to actually tack this down later. If you skip this step, then the main fashion fabric cup will not form properly because it doesn't have any support whatsoever, so it won't be able to fit into the lining cup without you holding it down. So I'm just trying my best to fit the main fashion fabric into the corset cup, and I'm pinning this down, and you can see that as I'm stretching it and pinning it down, it is relaxing properly. So what I'm going to do now is use needle and thread to tack it. I'm basically passing this through, so just pay close attention to how I'm doing this. I'm tacking it in a way that the thread will not be visible, and To do this, you pass the needle through underneath and pass the needle back through the same point that the thread passed through. That way you're going to have an invisible or seamless finish basically. So I'm just tacking this down at all the points that I feel is necessary to hold the fabric down to the lining. So if you are following this tutorial and you encounter this issue, don't see it as a problem. It's actually not a problem. All you have to do is tack this down. It's just normal for the fashion fabric to not directly fit into the cup when the lining cup is already stretched out, but the fashion fabric is not, okay? So guys, I noticed that I made a mistake when inserting this front yoke. I wanted to just cut it out, but I was like, let me show you guys. So I noticed that this front yoke, it wasn't where it's meant to be. It is supposed to align with the joining in the corset cup, which is here. But I mistakenly fixed it into the armhole, so I'm going to make adjustments and bring it to this line so that it can align properly. The first thing that made me notice that there was an error was that the yoke and the overlapping yoke wasn't aligning, and it is supposed to align because I know I drew the pattern properly, and also the armhole was looking very small and I was like, what is going on here? So I went ahead to make the adjustments so that we can continue with the tutorial. So the next thing to do is to iron this. So I ironed this off camera. Just make sure that you iron it properly. The next thing to do is to fix the modesty panel. So this is the modesty panel here. What you want to do is cut a fabric that is at least 9 inches wide. So 9 inches into 2 is 18 plus seam allowance of 1 inch for joining, okay? So the length will be the actual corset length, but short by 1 inch. So if the corset length at the back is 17, you will make the length 16, and then the wideness also depends on how much you took off the back. I know I took off 3 inches from the back, so I know that the wideness of the modesty panel has to be at least 6 inches. And then I added an extra 3 inch and added another 1 inch for joining. So I basically made the fabric to be 19 inches wide and 1 inch shorter than the actual corset length at the back. I folded the fabric into 2 and then stitched it down to form the modesty panel. And also I ironed stay to the fabric just to give it more stability. So in the process of attaching the modesty panel to the corset, I will also be creating the eyelet space. So first thing I'm going to do is to mark 2 inches from top to bottom on one edge of the modesty panel. So you do not want this modesty panel to get in the way of the eyelet space, okay? So what I'm going to do is to place the corset directly on that 2 inches line, and then I will stitch down on the 2 inch line. So I'm going to be using my hand to feel the modesty panel under, so make sure that I'm stitching it down. So just pay close attention to what I'm doing so that you can understand it better. What I am doing right now is that I'm stitching down on the modesty panel and the corset on that 2 inches line which I created. So it's not on the edge of the corset. If you do that, then you won't be able to create the eyelet space or lace the corset. So it is on the 2 inches line that I actually stitched down. And this is what this is looking like. So you can see that the 2 inches has been defined and the modesty panel has been attached. So after attaching the modesty panel, what is next to do is to just keep on creating the eyelet space. To do that, I'll just push the modesty panel back so that it doesn't get in the way of the eyelet space. Then I will come out by 1/2 inch and just stitch it down. So by doing that, I have created boning channel for the eyelet, because when you're fixing an eyelet, the eyelet has to be in between 2 boning channels. This is to keep the fabric from tearing when you are lacing the back. So this is the first boning channel that has been created. half an inch wide so that the boning can pass through. The second one will be at the other edge. So since one side is already closed up, all I have to do is to form one more stitch to create a half an inch wide boning channel. So I came inwards from the actual center back line by half of an inch and stitch that down to create the second boning channel. So in between will be where the eyelets will be placed. So this is what it is looking like. You can see the two boning channel here, and you can see that the modesty panel is not getting in the way of the eyelet space. So for the other side, since we are not attaching the modesty panel, we just stitch it down like that. So I'm first of all coming inwards from the center back by half of an inch. Since one side is already closed, all I have to do is to stitch down the other side. So this is it here. The first one has been created, and then I will mark the 2 inches which I marked on the other side so that both of them are equal and one isn't wider than the other. And I'll first of all stitch down on that 2 inches line to separate the eyelet space. So I'm just using my tape rule to mark it out so that I get a straight line, and I'm just trimming beads that are getting in the way. So this is what it is looking like. After that, I'll come in by half of an inch again and stitch it down. And with that, I've created the eyelet space. So this is it. This is what it is looking like. You can see that it is neatly attached. What I'm going to do next is to insert the boning. I've actually inserted all of the boning off camera. So for this, you have to use plastic boning and make sure that it is 1 inch shorter than the actual corset length. Then you use fire to melt the edges on both sides. You either melt it or you file it down, but it's easier to just melt the edges. And then you insert it. This is actually not really complicated. Just insert the boning for all of the sides. So this is what I'm talking about. This is the eyelet space here, and boning obviously has to be in between. I also mentioned that this is 1 inch shorter, and I melted the edges so it doesn't tear the fabric. And this is what it is looking like. You can see how neat it is inside. This is what they call inseam finishing. So this is really, really nice. I'm just trimming off the edges. If you notice that the edges aren't equal, you trim it off so that you can get something accurate. So I decided to use pins to hold down the fashion fabric and the lining together so that they'll be equal when I am trimming off and I don't end up cutting one shorter than the other. So this is just like a precaution to prevent errors. If you want to trim, just use safety pins to hold down the places that you see are jumping, or just hold everything down basically. And then I'm just using my tape rule to measure all of the sides, because the center back, they have to be equal on both sides. The sides has to be equal, everything has to be equal. So I'm just using my tape rule to measure everything, making sure that it is equal. Okay, and after I saw that it was equal, I went ahead to hem the edge. So to hem the edge, I'm using a black bias. This is just to give the corset a little bit of contrast. But if you want it to have a more finished, invisible look, you go ahead and use the same color of bias, or you use the shining face in the same color to bias the edges. But for me, I'm just going to be using a black bias for this. So I stitch down on the lining first and then turn this outwards so that the black lining will be all round in the front. So this is it. So at this point, we are almost done. This is everything on inseam finishing for a corset. You can see that everything is neat inside and outside. There's no rough edges. You can't see any of the stitches. Okay, so next thing to do is to join the shoulders. I've gone ahead to join the first one, and I want to show you guys how I'm going to do the other side. So before I join the shoulders together, I have to make sure that the overlapping yoke is placed right on the yoke. So this is the way I'm going to pin it down. I'm making sure that the 1/2 inch seam allowance I added to the overlapping yoke is folded inwards. So this I'm going to tack it down later with needle and thread, and it's going to come out looking very seamless. Okay, so I'm just pinning this down, making sure that when I'm pinning it, it is not getting in the way of the other lining. Remember that this lining is in 2 places. One is interfacing for the lace, the other one is the lining, and I want to join the shoulder in a way that it look very neat. So I did not let the pin pass through the other lining underneath, because I'm still going to spread it open. The more you are watching this, the more you will understand, so please try to not get confused. So I just spread it open and make sure that the joining lines are aligned properly. Then I use my pin to hold it down. So basically I faced right sides together, spreading it open, face right sides together. So the lace and lace is facing each other, lining and lining is facing each other, both the right sides. Okay, and I'm just pinning this down. After pinning it, I will go ahead and stitch it down. So this is what it is looking like after I've joined it together, and you can see that both the inside and the outside is very neat. The yoke is well tucked in, the overlapping yoke is also well tucked in. So the next thing I'm going to do is to sew the lacing for the corset, and for this I'm using a fabric that is 2 inches wide. So this is what you want, and I'm just going to stitch it down this way. So just watch the way I did it. I'm stitching it down like this because this is the only way to ensure that the lace is very secure when dragging. If you decide to stitch down right sides facing each other and then turn it inside out, the lacing can stretch and tear. So when you want to sew the lacing for a corset, it's best to stitch it down this way. You fold in 2 sides, fold it in again, and then just stitch down at the edge. So this way the lacing for the corsets will be very strong. So guys, at this point we are actually done with the corset already. What is left to do is to attach a sleeve. You can attach any kind of sleeve you want. I'm not showing a video on that because it's a basic long sleeve I did, and I just attached it to the corset. So we have done the corset. Next thing to do is to sew the skirt so that we can now stitch the corset down to the skirt to form an inbuilt corset. Alright guys, next thing to do is the skirt. The skirt is very easy to do. First thing I'm going to do is mark 1/2 inch seam allowance at the top before taking my horizontal measurement. This is going to be the joining allowance. So the horizontal measurements I'll be taking is the hip point, the above knee point, and the full skirt length, including another 1/2 inch for turning the skirt lace and the lining together. Okay, so I won't be adding that to the front of the skirt, but I will be adding that to the back. So when I'm taking the waist measurement, I will not add that allowance. That's because I'm doing a Basque waistline in front, so there's no need for a dart to be there. So after marking out all of the horizontal measurements, I'll use a ruler to draw a line and take all of my round measurements. For the waist, the roundness I will use is what I intend to cinch off my client's waist. So I'm cinching the waist to a waist 35, which means that it is a waist 35 that I'm going to measure as the skirt waist. Okay, and then I'll just take the other measurements as I normally would. I'll take the normal hip roundness, and whatever I have at the hip is what I'm going to bring to the above knee and also to the hem of the skirt. So I'm going to use a straight ruler to connect everything before moving on to shaping the skirt. It's a simple straight skirt I'm sewing. So I'm going to come to this above knee point here and mark 2 inches, which I'm going to connect 1 inch below the hip line, and then I'm going to mark that same 2 inches towards the edge of the skirt and just connect all of that together. So this is all on how I'm shaping the skirt. What I'm doing now is I'm adding 2-inch seam allowance. So I intend to have a total of 1.5-inch seam allowance after sewing. So the half of an inch is what I'm using to turn the lining and the lace together. After turning, I'll be left with 1.5-inch seam allowance. For that above knee, you can go ahead and measure the roundness of your client's above knee if you want it extra shaping. Okay, but I usually work with 2 inches and I think that is okay. So I'm going to go ahead and use the front of the skirt to cut out the back. As you can see, I added 2 inches to the center back, which is zip allowance, and I went ahead to add that allowance that I did not put on the front of the skirt, because it's very important to put back that because of the butt area. So don't skip the back that, always put it. So I'm going ahead to add the allowance for that and cut it out. So what I'm going to do is cut this on my lace fabric as well. As you can see, I've placed the lining on the lace and I'm just going to go ahead and cut it out. So after cutting this, I'm going to pin it all round and turn. I didn't really show that process because I don't want this video to be too long and that's not the main focus, but I'm going to show you guys how to take in the dart and fix the zip. So before you take in the dart, you have to stitch down where the dart is going to be taken, because you know that this is a lace and shining face together. You cannot take the dart for the lace separate and the dart for the shining face separate. If you do that, the lace might shift out of place. So what I usually do is that I just mark that dart line and then stitch down on that area. Doing this will prevent the lace from shifting out of place. And I'm just going to go ahead and take in the dart. The dart is usually 2 inches above the hip line. So I'll just take my dart like I normally would for both sides. So this is for the back. I went ahead to join the center back, but I'm still going to open up that zip area when I want to fix the zip. So this is the dart for both sides. What I want to do next is fix the zip. But before I fix the zip, I'm going to cut this center back with half of an inch. Doing this is going to prevent zip bulb. Some people usually do this on the pattern, but I always cut this out after taking in the dart. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm going to come from the center back and cut it straight to the dart point. So this is what it's looking like. For this zip allowance, I cut it straight before going in now to meet with the dart line, which is why it looks like this. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the center back so I can fix the zip. When you're fixing zip on a high waist skirt, you can't use a normal skirt zip because it will be too short for the zip space. So get the one that is 18 or 24 inches long. So you guys should please pay attention to this. When I want to fix the zip, I'm going to come down by half of an inch here from the zip stopper. This is to create space for folding in the lace and biasing the lace when I want to join it to the corset. So I just made it to come down by half of an inch and just fix the zip normally using the zip allowance. As you can see, fixing the zip is not really difficult because I already stitched from top to bottom at the center back and ironed it out. So the crease line is serving as a guide for fixing the zip. So that's a very easy way to fix a zip. You stitch from top to down and then you iron out the zip allowance. That way the crease line will serve as a guide for stitching the zip down, and you don't have to start chalking it or checking to see if the both sides are equal. Okay, so after fixing the zip, this is what it is looking like. I'll go ahead and join the sides together and that will be everything for the skirt. The next thing to do, which is what most of you have been waiting for the past 1 hour, is to join the skirt and the corset together. So this is my client here. You can see that this is fitting really nicely already. So what I want to do is a Basque waistline. To do this, I'm going to first of all cut through the center of the skirt. So make sure that the skirt is worn properly and you are cutting through the midpoint. If this is not on the midpoint, when you want to join into, you see that you cut the Basque waistline in the wrong place. So this is me just checking if the skirt is low enough to where I want it to be and if my client likes it. So I decided to fold it in first for her to see if she's okay with where it is, and if she's not, I will just cut it down further through the middle. And as you can see, she was already dancing. I was like, oh, I like it. So I just opened it up so that I can cut out the side. So it's very easy to cut out the side. As you can see, you just basically cut through the line that is falling. Okay, so this is exactly how I cut it out. Nothing too serious. It's actually not difficult. What people find confusing is how to join it together. I'll soon show you guys how to do that. So my client was okay with what I cut out. So this is all on how to cut out a Basque waistline. So what I'm going to do next is to use red chalk to mark all around the point that I have cut out, so that when I want to join the skirt to the corset, it will be easy to do. So I'm using a colorful chalk for this so that it doesn't clean up and I can see it easily. So guys, after doing that, my client took off the skirt, and the next thing you want to do at this point is to hem the edge of the skirt that you have cut out to make it neat. And you can either whip this or bias it. So I'm going to be using the same color of bias to bias the skirt. In this clip, I'm just showing you guys how I'm biasing the skirt. I'm starting from the front and I'm folding it inwards towards the back. So the next thing to do now is to join the skirt and the corset together. To do this, what you want to do is to make sure that all of the points match. So you're going to place this along that chalk line that you drew on the corset. And what I did was use needle and thread to tack down some of the places so that when I want to stitch it down, it won't be an issue. And you want this to stop right beside the eyelet. The stitch on the skirt can't surpass where the eyelet space is going to be. So to join this, what you want to do is to skip the boning part. When you get the boning, you will skip it and continue stitching. That is all. Because I know that was used to confuse people, like, how am I going to stitch this down when it's plastic boning that I put there? You actually won't stitch on the boning. You will skip it and continue stitching. Don't worry, it's still going to be neat. The skirt won't lose, none of that. Just top stitch before you get the boning, and after you skip the boning, you stop stitch again, and that is it. So this is what it is looking like. This side, I'm just going to fold it in and tack this leftover here, and then everything will look very neat. So you can see that this stopped directly at the eyelet space. This is how the front is looking like. You can see that the stitch is also very secure. So I hope you guys learned a lot from this video. Sorry, I lost the footage on how to fix an eyelet, so you'll have to check my channel for that. I have it already posted from another tutorial. So this is everything. You can see how neat it is on the inside. So this overlapping yoke, as you can see, is looking very neat. That's because I used needle and thread to tack it down, and because of that, it looks very seamless. If you want the complete tutorial on this free corset course, go ahead and check the description. Also check my playlist titled Free Corset Course Yellow Asoebi. You'll find it there. This is all on how to sew the dress. I hope you guys found this video very helpful. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments section, and also stay tuned for more free tutorials like this coming up in the future. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye.